Black poor homeless girl saves billionaire CEO's only son from killers. Then. Heavy rain poured over narrow alley in New York as a young homeless girl stood her ground. Natasha, just 14, faced 3 grown men armed with knives. Her hoodie was soaked, her hands trembling, but her eyes stayed locked on them. Behind her, a small boy hid, clutching her torn sleeve, his face streaked with tears. The men lunged. Natasha moved fast, using every bit of strength she had. A quick strike. One man fell. Another swung and missed before hitting the ground with a groan. The last turned to run just as police sirens grew louder. Natasha's knuckles were bleeding, but the boy was safe. "You're okay now," she whispered, brushing dirt from his cheek. Suddenly, a black SUV screeched to a stop at the alley's entrance. A tall man in a suit jumped out, shouting the boy's name. The child's face lit up. "Daddy!" he cried, running forward. The man froze when he saw Natasha, a homeless girl standing over unconscious attackers, protecting his son. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. But this rescue was only the beginning. Because the girl he just met held the truth about the people who once tried to destroy his family. Please, tell us where you are watching from, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heart-touching stories. Now, let's go back to how it all began. Willie Hardy stood frozen, his heart racing as he watched his only son cling to a soaked, trembling girl in an alley that smelled of oil and fear. Natasha's knuckles were bleeding, her torn jeans soaked to the bone. When the police arrived minutes later, she refused medical help, only asking if the boy was safe. That was enough for Willie. He made one quick call, and within minutes, a convoy of security cars surrounded them. "You're coming with us," he said gently. "You saved my son. Let me at least make sure you're okay." Inside Willie's penthouse, Natasha could barely lift her head. The place looked like another world, marble floors, glass walls, and a view that touched the clouds. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. A maid brought her food, but she hesitated before touching it. It had been days since her last real meal. Smith climbed onto the sofa beside her, smiling brightly. "You're my hero," he said between bites of his dinner. She chuckled softly. "Heroes don't live in alleys." Willie watched them, something stirring in his chest. "Natasha," he said, "you risked your life for my boy. I want to reward you. $10 million. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth. 10 million. That kind of money could change every kid's life on the streets. But big numbers came with big dangers. Her mind flashed to shadows, fire, and screams. "I can't," she said quietly. "Money draws eyes, and I've been hiding for a long time." Willie frowned. Hiding? From what? Before she could answer, Kevin, Willie's sharp-suited assistant, stepped forward. "Sir, we need to be careful. This girl could be involved. It's too convenient she found your son before anyone else." Natasha's eyes narrowed. "You think I risked my life for a setup?" "Kidnappers work in teams," Kevin replied coldly. Willie raised a hand. "That's enough." He looked at Natasha again. There was something in her eyes. Pain, strength, loss. "If you wanted the reward, you'd have taken the boy straight to the police, not fought armed men in a back alley." Natasha said nothing, just looked at her worn sneakers. Smith suddenly ran over and grabbed her hand. "Dad, she saved me. I want her to stay. Please. She's the nicest person I've ever met. She's like the mom I never had." The room fell silent. Willie's expression softened. His late wife's memory flickered briefly, but the boy's words hit deep. He turned to Natasha. "You need a place to stay, don't you?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. I don't stay in one place too long. What if I make you an offer? Willie said. Not charity. A job. Be Smith's bodyguard. Stay here in the guest house. I'll pay you well. You'll be safe, and so will he. Kevin's head snapped toward his boss. Sir, that's a mistake. It's my decision, Willie replied firmly. Natasha hesitated. The idea of shelter and steady work tugged at her, but trust was dangerous. Still, she saw Smith's hopeful eyes. Fine, she said at last. But it's temporary. I don't trust anyone. Not anymore. Willie nodded. Fair enough. You'll have your space. You've earned that. Later that night, Natasha stood by the guesthouse window, watching city lights flicker far below. Her reflection stared back, bruised, tired, but alive. She touched the small pendant around her neck, the only thing that survived the fire that killed her parents. A memory surfaced, her father's voice. If anything happens to me, trust no one. Stay hidden. She whispered to herself, I'm still trying, Dad. Behind her, a soft knock sounded. It was Smith, holding a pillow. Can I stay here for a bit? I can't sleep. She smiled faintly and nodded. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. But outside, in the cold wind sweeping across the rooftop, Kevin stood making a quiet phone call. Yeah, he said. She's in. Keep watching her. I want to know who this girl really is. Natasha woke up in a soft bed for the first time in years, but the comfort felt foreign. The sheets were too clean, the air too quiet. She missed the hum of the streets, the sound of people moving, the reminder that she wasn't the only one fighting to survive. Every corner of the guest house screamed wealth: paintings, glass furniture, a bathroom that looked bigger than the shelters she used to hide in. She sat by the window, eating toast slowly, wondering how long this peace would last. Smith burst through the door without knocking, wearing pajamas and carrying 2 toy swords. Come on. You promised you'd teach me how to fight. Natasha smiled despite herself. You really think you're ready for that? He nodded. If bad guys come again, I don't want to hide. They practiced in the yard. Natasha showed him how to stay balanced, how to duck, how to react without fear. Willie watched from the balcony above. Seeing his son laugh again filled him with gratitude and curiosity about the girl who saved him. Later that afternoon, Willie called Natasha to his office. Close the door, he said. She stood awkwardly, still wearing Smith's oversized hoodie. Natasha, Willie began, there's something you should know. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I knew your father, Marcus Stanford. Her breath caught. You knew my dad. Willie nodded. He worked for me. 6 years ago, he was Hardy Industries' top security analyst. Brilliant mind. Loyal man. I trusted him. Natasha gripped the edge of the desk. You're saying my father worked for you before he died? Yes, Willie said quietly. The fire that took your family, it wasn't random. Marcus found something. A large-scale theft inside my company. Millions disappearing from hidden accounts. He told me he'd found the person behind it, and that he'd send me proof. But before he could, his house burned down. Natasha's voice trembled. You think the fire was murder? Willie's eyes were tired. I never stopped thinking that. The day before he died, he sent me an encrypted file. I've tried for years to open it, but your father's encryption was like a maze. No one could break it. He turned his computer screen toward her. A single folder sat on the desktop labeled Project Phoenix. Natasha stared at it, her heart racing. The lines of code on the screen looked like home. She reached for the keyboard, her fingers tracing the patterns. "He always had a unique way of coding," she murmured. "He taught me some of it before the fire." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't want to shed. "He said if anything ever happened, I'd understand his work one day." Willie leaned back. "Can you open it?" "I think so. But it'll take time." That night, Natasha sat in the guest house surrounded by laptops and scribbled notes. As she typed, flashes of memory came rushing back, her dad smiling at the kitchen table, teaching her how to encrypt files, telling her, some secrets can save lives if kept long enough to reach the right person. Each line of code she cracked felt like she was hearing his voice again. Meanwhile, in the main penthouse, Willie sat in front of the television. A news report flashed across the screen. Breaking news. Sources confirm the body of Smith Hardy, son of billionaire CEO Willie Hardy, was found earlier tonight. The family has not released an official statement. Kevin turned to him. "Sir, are you sure about this? Faking your son's death is risky." Willie's jaw tightened. "If someone wanted my boy dead, this will make them think they succeeded. The people who ordered that kidnapping are still out there. I want them to come out of hiding." Downstairs, Natasha overheard the broadcast and felt her stomach twist. "He faked it," she whispered. "He's using Smith's death as bait." She looked toward the sleeping boy in the next room and clenched her fists. This isn't just about greed. Whoever came after him knew the exact time, place, and route of his school trip. She glanced back at the half-decoded file glowing on her laptop screen. Her father's work, Willie's fear, and Smith's kidnapping, all of it was connected. The kidnappers weren't random criminals. They were professionals with inside information. Someone powerful had wanted Smith gone, and years ago, that same power had burned her world to ashes. Natasha took a deep breath, the reflection of the code shining in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "I think I'm finally finding the truth you died for." 3 nights later, Natasha finally cracked the code. The screen blinked, and lines of encrypted data shifted into readable text. Her pulse quickened as names, account numbers, and transfers filled the screen. At the top of the document was a name she didn't expect, Richard Hardy. She scrolled, reading faster, her eyes wide. The file contained years of transactions, money quietly siphoned from Hardy Industries into offshore accounts. 7 years of theft, hidden behind dummy corporations and fake contracts. And there, buried deep in an archived email chain, was something that made her hands tremble. A transfer labeled payment, Operation Fire. The date matched the night her parents died. Her stomach turned cold. "He paid for it," she whispered. "He killed them." Moments later, Willie entered her room, drawn by the sound of her crying. "Natasha? What's wrong?" She turned the laptop toward him. "It was your brother. He's the one who stole from the company. He's the one who killed my parents." Willie stared at the screen, disbelief written all over his face. "No. Richard? That can't be. Look at the transfers. Look at the date of the fire. He used the same criminal group that took Smith. He paid them again, years later." Willie sank into the nearest chair, silent for a long moment. Then, his voice broke. "My own brother. All this time." Natasha clenched her fists. "He wanted your company, your money, and when my father got too close, he made sure he never spoke again." Willie rubbed his temples. "That means Smith's kidnapping wasn't about ransom. It was about removing the only heir. Richard wants to inherit everything." The reality hit them both at once. Willie's son had nearly died at the hands of his own uncle. Willie stood up abruptly, pacing. "We'll go to the police. We'll hand over everything." "No," Natasha said sharply. He's too careful. The second you make a move, he'll know. He probably has people inside your company, maybe even in law enforcement. You'll need proof he can't deny. Willie looked at her, torn between rage and despair. So what do we do? Sit here while he takes over my company and walks free? Natasha shook her head. No. We use his greed against him. Right now, he thinks Smith is dead. Let him keep believing that. While he's celebrating, we collect the rest of the evidence, enough to bury him for good. Willie hesitated. That's too dangerous. He already ordered a child's death. You'd be next if he knew you cracked this. I've lived in danger for 5 years, Natasha said quietly. I know how to move unseen. You don't. He met her eyes, seeing a determination that reminded him of Marcus. You sound like your father, he said softly. She smiled faintly. He taught me everything I needed to survive. Willie walked to the window, staring out at the city below. If this fails, he could destroy everything. The company, our names, maybe even the police records. He has influence. Then we don't fail, Natasha said simply. He's already made one mistake, underestimating me. He'll make another. Willie turned back to her. What's your plan? We make him feel safe. Let him think he's already won. You keep acting as if you're grieving. Let your brother take over operations at Hardy Industries. Meanwhile, I'll follow the digital trail. Every transaction, every meeting. Once we have the right proof, we go public with it. No deals, no lawyers, just truth. Willie sighed heavily. I don't like putting you in this. You don't have to like it, she replied, her voice steady. I'm doing it for my father. For your son. For every person that man hurt to protect his greed. Willie studied her for a long time before finally nodding. All right. But we do this carefully. One wrong move, and Richard will come after all of us. Natasha closed the laptop and stood. Let him try. Later that night, Willie sat alone in his study, rereading the documents she'd uncovered. His brother's name burned on the screen like a wound. Memories of their childhood came flooding back. Richard's jealousy, his sharp tongue, the way he always wanted control. Kevin entered quietly. Sir, you look tired. Willie didn't look up. Do you believe in loyalty, Kevin? I try to, sir. Then help me prove mine, to my family. Kevin hesitated. You're really going after him. I don't have a choice, Willie replied. He's already taken too much. Across the city, Richard Hardy sat in his office, sipping expensive whiskey while watching the news coverage of his nephew's death. His phone buzzed, a message from an associate confirming that Hardy Industries board members were ready to appoint him acting CEO. A satisfied smirk crossed his face. Finally, he murmured. My turn. He poured another drink, completely unaware that the girl he'd orphaned years ago was alive, and about to destroy everything he'd built on blood and lies. For the next 2 weeks, Natasha moved through the city like a shadow. Every night, she slipped out of the Hardy estate dressed in dark clothes, her hair tucked under a cap, her focus razor sharp. She carried only a burner phone, a hidden MIC, and the street instincts that had kept her alive for half a decade. Her mission was clear: find proof that Richard Hardy was behind everything before he could strike again. Richard's life looked clean from the outside, but Natasha had learned that evil often hid behind confidence and charm. He met business partners at rooftop restaurants, hosted quiet board meetings in private rooms, and took unmarked cars to remote buildings after midnight. Natasha followed from a distance, always 2 steps behind but never caught. One night, she tracked his driver to an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Inside, Richard was meeting with the same men who had tried to kidnap Smith. Through a cracked window, her camera caught him laughing, saying he was glad to be finally rid of that spoiled brat. Every word was recorded. Her hands shook as she hit save. This was the proof they needed. Back at the estate, Smith was having a harder time. Hiding wasn't easy for an 8-year-old who used to have playdates, friends, and school. He missed normal life, the sound of the school bell, even homework. Natasha did her best to keep him smiling. At night, she told him stories about her childhood on the streets, how she'd survived winter with nothing but cardboard and courage, how she'd learned to read signs people ignored, and how kindness sometimes came from strangers with nothing to give. Smith listened wide-eyed, calling her the bravest person in the world. Each time he said it, Natasha's heart softened a little more. Kevin, Willie's assistant, began to see Natasha differently too. At first, he treated her with suspicion, watching her every move, convinced she was after the reward money. But after seeing how protective she was of Smith and how determined she was to help Willie, guilt crept in. One evening, he found her in the study, reviewing video files. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." Natasha looked up briefly. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "Now help me bring down the man who paid to have a child killed." Together, they began building a solid case: video clips, voice recordings, and financial documents Richard had unknowingly signed. The walls were closing in on him, but Natasha knew it had to be handled carefully. Willie, meanwhile, was struggling to accept the truth about his brother. He spent hours alone, staring at old photos of the two of them as children. "How did I not see it?" he muttered one night, his voice cracking. "My own brother." Natasha placed a hand on his shoulder. "Family blindness is the easiest disguise," she said softly. "You see what you want to believe." Willie nodded, wiping his eyes. "Tomorrow's the shareholders' meeting. Richard's planning to declare Smith dead and take control of the company." Natasha's face hardened. "Then tomorrow, we stop him. The police will be waiting outside. All we need is to expose him in front of everyone." That night, she finalized the plan with Kevin. The evidence would play on the big screen at the meeting. Richard's voice, his payments, his confession. Everything. It would be over. For the first time in years, Natasha felt hope. The next morning, Smith could finally step out of hiding and live without fear. But fate wasn't done testing her. As Natasha left the estate that evening to deliver one final data chip to the authorities, a pair of black SUVs parked across the street caught her eye. The men inside were watching. One of them raised a phone and took a picture of her car's plate. Her stomach tightened. She drove off calmly, but her mind raced. Richard's men had found them. Minutes later, Willie's phone buzzed with a message. He froze as he read the words aloud. "I know the boy lives. If you expose me tomorrow, he dies for real this time." The room went silent. Natasha's heartbeat pounded in her ears. The trap they had set was perfect. But now, the enemy knew they were coming. The morning of the shareholders' meeting arrived under sky thick with gray clouds. Hardy Industries headquarters buzzed with activity. Security guards lined the marble halls, reporters filled the press area, and hundreds of shareholders gathered inside the grand auditorium. Cameras were already live, broadcasting the event to every business network in the country. This was supposed to be a somber memorial for the late Smith Hardy. Instead, it was about to become something none of them would ever forget. Richard Hardy stood backstage, adjusting the black tie on his expensive suit. His reflection in the mirror was perfectly composed, though his eyes flickered with impatience. To everyone else, he looked like a grieving uncle ready to carry on his brother's legacy. Only a handful of people in the world knew the truth, that his grief was an act, and his speech was the final step in his plan to seize everything his family had built. When the clock struck 10, The lights dimmed, and the master of ceremonies introduced him. Richard stepped out to a round of polite applause, his face solemn. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and heavy with false emotion, "today we gather not just as shareholders, but as family, to honor the memory of my nephew, Smith Hardy, whose life was tragically taken too soon." The crowd fell silent. Some bowed their heads. Others looked toward Willie Hardy's empty seat in the front row, unaware he was standing behind the curtain with Natasha and Kevin, waiting for the signal. Richard continued, pausing at all the right moments. "My brother has been devastated. As his sibling, it's my duty to ensure that Hardy Industries continues its proud legacy. We must remain strong for him, for our employees, and for the future." He took a breath and straightened his posture, his voice gaining authority. "That is why, effective immediately, I will assume leadership of this company to uphold our vision and protect our investors." Applause rippled through the hall, brief, uncertain. Reporters lifted their cameras. But before Richard could sign the document projected behind him, the heavy double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. The echo silenced the room. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway, hand in hand, were Natasha and Smith Hardy, alive. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The sound of gasps swept through the audience like a wave. Cameras flashed so rapidly it looked like lightning. The boy everyone believed was dead stared directly at the man claiming to mourn him. Smith's small hand tightened around Natasha's. Willie stepped out from the side aisle, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Richard," he said, "the performance is over." Richard froze. His confident smile faltered for the first time. "Willie, this must be some kind of misunderstanding." "No," Willie replied. "The only misunderstanding is thinking you could destroy your own family and get away with it." He turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, my brother isn't the hero he pretends to be. He's a thief, a murderer, and he tried to have my son killed." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, flashes intensified, and security hesitated, unsure what to do. Richard's face turned pale as Kevin took over the presentation system. Within seconds, the giant screens behind the stage flickered to life. One by one, documents, videos, and voice recordings appeared. Richard's bank transfers, his offshore accounts, his meetings with the kidnappers. Finally, Natasha's recording played, Richard laughing in that warehouse, boasting about being finally rid of that brat. The audience gasped audibly. "Marcus Stanford," Willie said, his voice trembling but clear. "The man you called your friend, he died because of you." Richard tried to recover, his voice rising over the noise. "This is a setup. A fabrication. My brother's grief has driven him mad. That girl, she's manipulating all of you." But no one seemed convinced. The evidence kept rolling, frame after frame, showing years of stolen funds, secret transfers, and contacts with hired criminals. It was impossible to deny. In a final act of desperation, Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a small handgun. Screams filled the room. Security froze. "Nobody move," he shouted, grabbing Smith and yanking him close. The boy cried out as Richard pressed the gun against his temple. "I swear I'll do it." Cameras stopped flashing. Every breath in the room felt suspended. Willie stepped forward instinctively, his voice cracking. "Richard, don't. He's your nephew." "Shut up." Richard roared. "You think you can take everything from me? The company, my reputation, my life? I built this. I deserve it." His hand shook, his composure gone. Sweat rolled down his temple as the crowd stared, terrified to move. Natasha's pulse pounded in her ears, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. "Richard," she said gently, stepping closer. You don't want to do this. He glared at her. Stay back, or I swear. She lifted her hands. You've already lost, Richard. Look around you. Every camera in this room is recording. If you hurt him, there's no coming back. The security team hesitated, watching Natasha move closer, one careful step at a time. Her voice never wavered. I know what you're feeling. You're desperate, trapped, angry. But hurting a child won't fix what you broke. It'll only prove everyone right. Richard's breathing grew ragged. You don't know me. I know enough, she said quietly. You can still end this without more blood on your hands. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Fear, confusion, the ghost of guilt. Natasha took another step closer, steady, calm. Smith's tear-streaked face looked up at her, trembling but trusting. Every eye in the room was locked on them. No one dared to move. The outcome now rested on Natasha's next words, and the courage she'd carried all her life. Richard, Natasha said softly, keeping her eyes fixed on him, her tone steady but calm. You know who I am, don't you? Richard frowned, confused by her composure. I don't care who you are. Move away from the boy. She took one more step closer, slow and deliberate. You should care. Because 6 years ago, you destroyed my family. My name is Natasha Stanford. My father was Marcus Stanford, the man you had killed. The name hit him like a strike. His expression twisted into shock, then quickly hardened. You're lying, he snapped. Marcus Stanford's daughter died in that fire. Natasha shook her head. You made sure of that, didn't you? But you failed. You took my parents, but you didn't take me. I've spent every day since then surviving, waiting for this moment, to finish what my father started. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Willie's eyes widened. Even he hadn't known the full story until now. Richard's grip on the gun tightened, pressing it harder against Smith's temple. So this is what it's about, he said with a mocking laugh. Revenge. You're just a homeless girl chasing ghosts. Your father was weak. He thought he could expose me. Look where that got him. Natasha's jaw clenched. You call it weakness. I call it integrity. He gave his life trying to protect people like you from hurting others. You can insult me all you want, but you'll never erase what he built. Richard sneered. You? You think anyone's going to believe a street kid over me? I've run this company for years. You're nothing. Her voice dropped, quiet but firm. I'm the daughter of the man who trusted you. The one you betrayed. And today, in front of all these people, you confessed to killing him. His eyes widened slightly. What are you talking about? Natasha's lips curled into a small, steady smile. She tilted her wrist, showing the black wristband under her sleeve, a small blinking light. You've been recorded this whole time, Richard. Every word you've said is being streamed to the press, to the authorities, and to every camera in this room. The realization hit him instantly. His pupils shrank. Panic flickered across his face. No, you're bluffing. You can check the monitors, she said calmly. You just confessed to ordering murders, kidnapping, and theft, in front of hundreds of witnesses. It's over. Richard's breathing turned shallow. His hand shook violently, finger hovering over the trigger. You think you can take everything from me? He hissed. You think I'll go to prison while you walk away like a hero? Natasha took another step closer. You don't have to go to prison today, Richard. You can drop the gun and end this without hurting anyone else. Smith whimpered softly. Natasha's eyes softened for a second, then sharpened again. Let him go. He's just a kid. Haven't you taken enough from families already? Shut up. Richard screamed, his voice cracking under pressure. His hand jerked. Gasps filled the room. For a split second, chaos teetered on the edge. But Natasha didn't freeze. Her body moved faster than thought, a reflex her father had drilled into her when she was still small enough to hold a training stick. In one clean, decisive motion, she closed the gap between them. Her left hand deflected the barrel upward. Her right gripped his wrist. She twisted sharply, shifting her weight. The gun fired, a deafening crack that echoed through the auditorium ceiling. Screams filled the room. Flashes from cameras burst like lightning. Richard stumbled, the gun slipping from his grasp. In the same motion, Natasha swept his leg and pinned him hard to the floor, her knee pressing into his shoulder, one hand locking his wrist behind his back. "Get the gun!" someone shouted. Security rushed in, weapons drawn but cautious not to fire. Richard writhed beneath her, shouting in fury, "You stupid girl! You don't know who you're dealing with." Natasha's voice was calm, cold even. "I know exactly who you are. You're the man who killed my parents. The man who tried to kill an innocent child. And you just confessed in front of the world." The crowd stood frozen, stunned by what they had witnessed. Kevin ran up to secure the weapon while two officers moved in to cuff Richard. Willie stood motionless, eyes wet, as if the weight of years finally came crashing down. Richard thrashed weakly as the officers lifted him. "You'll regret this," he shouted, voice breaking. "You think this is over? I'll..." "Take him," one of the officers ordered, cutting him off. The handcuffs clicked shut. Richard's words turned to incoherent anger as he was dragged away, cameras following every step. Natasha exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her body at last. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let it show. She turned toward Smith, who ran to her, throwing his small arms around her waist. "You're the bravest person in the world," he said through tears. Natasha knelt, hugging him back tightly. "No, Smith. You are. You never stopped believing we'd make it out." Willie approached slowly, his voice low and filled with awe. "You saved my son, and my company. I don't even know how to thank you." She looked up at him, her expression soft. "Thank my dad. Everything I did today, he taught me long before I lost him." Willie nodded, struggling to hold back emotion. Cameras flashed wildly as reporters whispered about the homeless girl who just brought down a corporate giant. Natasha stood beside Smith and Willie as security cleared the stage. The audience watched in stunned silence, many in tears, some applauding quietly. As Richard was led out in handcuffs, Natasha glanced toward the massive screen still showing her father's decrypted files. His old message, the one he'd sent to Willie before he died, glowed faintly at the top of the display. "Truth always finds a way," it read. Natasha smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she felt the truth had finally done just that. 3 months later, the world finally knew the truth. Richard Hardy, once a respected executive and heir apparent to Hardy Industries, was sentenced to life in prison for murder, attempted murder, and embezzlement. His fall dominated the news cycle for weeks, but what the world couldn't stop talking about wasn't him. It was the girl who exposed him. Headlines called her the guardian angel of Hardy Industries. Reporters camped outside the Hardy estate hoping to get an interview with Natasha Stanford, the former homeless teenager who took down one of the most powerful men in New York. Despite the praise, Natasha struggled with the attention. For years she'd been invisible, a shadow moving between alleys and shelters. Now, her face was on magazine covers and television screens. People wanted her story, but she wasn't ready to relive it again and again. Fame felt heavier than hunger ever did. Willie noticed her unease. One evening, He found her on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, sitting quietly with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You've changed a lot of lives, Natasha," he said softly. "Including mine." She gave a faint smile. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted the truth." "That's exactly why you did," Willie replied. After a pause, he continued, "I want to give you something your father would have wanted for you. Stability. A home. Family." Natasha turned to look at him, wary but curious. "I want to adopt you," Willie said plainly. "Not because you saved us, but because you belong here. You deserve more than survival." The words hit her harder than she expected. Part of her longed to say yes immediately, but another part, the one that had slept on concrete and trusted no one, held her back. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted quietly. "Every time I start to feel safe, it feels like it could disappear." Willie didn't press. "You don't have to decide now. Just know that my door, and my heart, are open whenever you're ready." Over the following weeks, life at the Hardy estate began to settle. Smith was back in school, happier than ever. Kevin, once skeptical of Natasha, now treated her like family, often joking that she was the real CEO of Courage. Willie established the Marcus Stanford Memorial Scholarship, funding education for underprivileged youth in Natasha's father's name. Seeing her father's legacy honored that way filled her with pride and sorrow. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being caught between two worlds, the girl from the streets and the young woman living in a mansion. Some nights, she woke in a panic, half expecting the sound of sirens or the cold bite of wind through cardboard walls. One morning, Natasha found a small envelope under her door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Smith. "Dear Natasha, I know you think you're not ready to be part of a family. But you already are. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. I don't want you as my mom because you saved me. I want you as my mom because you understand me. You know what it's like to be scared and still fight anyway. That's what heroes do. Love, Smith." She read it twice, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time in years, tears fell without fear attached to them. A few days later, Natasha asked Willie for a quiet day off from all the cameras and press calls. She took a taxi to a cemetery on the edge of the city, a place she hadn't visited since she was 9. The air was crisp, the ground still damp from a morning rain. She stopped in front of 2 unmarked graves. Her parents' resting place. She knelt slowly, brushing away the weeds that had grown around the stones. From her backpack, she pulled out 2 polished headstones she'd finally been able to afford. One read Marcus Stanford, beloved father and protector. The other, Elena Stanford, gentle heart, fearless spirit. Natasha traced the letters with her fingertips. "I finished it, Dad," she whispered. "The truth you wanted the world to know. It's out. Richard's gone. And I found people who care about me the way you did. They don't replace you, but they make me feel like I still have a family." A gentle breeze passed through the trees. For the first time since that night 5 years ago, she felt at peace. Later that evening, as she sat in her room overlooking the city lights, memories flooded her mind. Her father teaching her how to defend herself, the endless nights sleeping under bridges, the moment she fought off kidnappers in a dark alley, the explosion of camera flashes in the courtroom. Each scene blurred into a single montage of survival, pain, and redemption. From a cardboard box to a courtroom. From an alley to the Hardy estate. Natasha finally smiled, not the cautious kind she used on the streets, but a real one, soft, genuine, unguarded. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She felt like she had arrived where she was meant to be. Tomorrow could bring anything, but tonight, she had peace. And that was more than enough. 6 months after Richard Hardy's conviction, the Hardy estate was quieter, But it wasn't the silence of grief anymore. It was peace. On a bright spring morning, a handful of people gathered in a small courtroom. There was no press, no fanfare, just family. Willie stood beside Natasha, his expression filled with pride and emotion. Smith sat between them, holding both their hands. Kevin waited in the back, smiling like an older brother who had watched them all come full circle. When the judge read the decree, "Natasha Stanford is hereby adopted as Natasha Hardy," the room erupted in gentle applause. Smith grinned so wide his cheeks hurt. "It's official," he said, tugging at her arm. "You're my mom." Natasha laughed, eyes glistening. "Guess that makes you my kid." Willie leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly. "Welcome home, Natasha Hardy." The ceremony was over in minutes, but for Natasha, it felt like the closing of a lifetime's chapter. The girl who once slept under bridges was now part of a family that would never let her fall again. After the adoption, Willie invited everyone back to the estate for a quiet celebration. The dining hall was decorated with white lilies, Natasha's favorite, and soft jazz played in the background. No speeches, no photographers, just laughter and the smell of freshly baked bread. Willie stood to make a small toast. "This house used to echo with loss," he said, raising his glass. "But now, it's filled with second chances." Natasha reminded us that strength isn't about power, it's about heart. Today, we don't just welcome a new Hardy. We honor the family we chose. Natasha smiled, holding Smith close. The word second chances stayed with her long after dinner ended. Later that night, as she walked through the garden with Willie, he told her about something he'd been working on quietly. "You once told me that no one ever came for you when you were out there," he said. "I can't change your past, but I can change someone else's future." He explained that he had been reaching out to the shelters and youth centers Natasha once relied on, looking for kids she knew, those still lost in the system. He wanted to help them find safety, education, and a new start. Natasha stopped walking. "You did that?" He nodded. "You inspired it." A few weeks later, Natasha launched her own foundation, Second Chances, dedicated to helping homeless children find education, housing, and long-term support. She used the $10 million reward money she'd received for exposing Richard to fund its first year. "No child should have to fight the way I did," she said at the launch. "Every life deserves a way back." The foundation quickly grew, partnering with schools and shelters across the city. Reporters called it the heart of Hardy Industries. Natasha called it home in progress. Smith thrived in the months that followed. His grades soared, his laughter filled the halls, and he loved telling his friends that his mom was a real-life superhero. Natasha, still humble, would blush every time. Willie and Natasha's bond deepened too. He taught her about leadership, finance, and strategy, insisting that the same instincts that helped her survive could make her a great businesswoman. She, in turn, taught him resilience, empathy, and how to see potential where others saw problems. One evening, after a long day of meetings for second chances, Natasha found herself standing on the balcony overlooking the glittering New York skyline. The same view she'd once looked up at from the streets below. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 memories, both the pain and the progress. Smith padded out barefoot, joining her. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked softly. "The streets, I mean." Natasha thought for a moment. "I miss the person I had to be to survive," she admitted. "She was tough. She never gave up. But I love the person I get to be now, your mom." Smith smiled and leaned against her. "I love that person too." Willie stepped out onto the balcony, a mug of coffee in hand. "You two planning to watch the whole city fall asleep?" he teased. "Maybe," Natasha said, smiling. "It's nice to see it from up here." Willie joined them, wrapping an arm around each of their shoulders. Together, they watched the last streaks of sunset fade into the skyline. The world below kept moving, cars, lights, people chasing dreams, but for that one quiet moment, time stood still. Natasha Hardy wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She had found her place. A daughter. A mother. A survivor turned savior. And above all, a reminder that even the broken can build something beautiful again. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when your world falls apart. And sometimes, the person who saves you is the one who needed saving most. Natasha's journey began with loss, fear, and loneliness, but it ended with something far greater: hope, love, and the courage to start again. From sleeping in alleys to standing at the heart of the Hardy family, she proved that your past doesn't define your worth, it refines it. Every scar she carried told a story of survival. Every choice she made built a bridge to a better future, not just for herself, but for everyone she touched. Smith found his mother, Willie found his daughter, and Natasha found the family she thought she'd lost forever. Together, they turned pain into purpose and proved that second chances can change the world. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We're dropping another incredible story tomorrow that you won't want to miss. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you loved most about Natasha's journey. Your support helps us create more powerful stories like this. Stories that remind us that no matter how broken life feels, redemption is always possible. Thank you for watching, and thank you for believing in the power of compassion, courage, and family.